Psychological trauma operates as a literal wound to the mind. It violently severs a person's ability to process reality as a continuous, linear sequence. Sigmund Freud famously categorized this damage as a wound of the mind, a concept literary theorist Kathy Carruth later expanded upon. Carruth defined trauma as an unclaimed experience, an event so overwhelming that the brain cannot immediately process it, rendering it highly resistant to normal language and memory. This creates an immediate paradox for authors attempting to write about traumatized characters. Traditional realistic fiction relies heavily on sequential plot logic, actions leading directly to consequences. But trauma, by definition, defies sequence. Traditional storytelling operates on what physicists call chronometric time. This is the rigid, objective progression of the clock, governed by cause and effect, a mechanical framework formalized by Isaac Newton. Human consciousness in the aftermath of a deeply distressing event often rejects that Newtonian clock. The psychological reality of a survivor can be fractured and nonlinear, looping through involuntary flashbacks and jarring memory gaps. While realistic prose can describe these symptoms, science fiction provides a physical environment that follows the same erratic rules as the survivor's memory. This structural alignment has given rise to an emergent literary subgenre, the science fiction of trauma. Rather than relying on internal monologues to describe abstract pain, this genre literalizes psychological symptoms. The internal cognitive estrangement of the survivor is projected outward, becoming the physical reality of the narrative world. We can see this mechanism in Kurt Vonnegut's 1969 novel, Slaughterhouse-Five. Vonnegut utilizes the trope of time travel to construct a physical representation of macro-historical trauma. Similarly, Matt Haig's 2020 novel, The Midnight Library, employs the concept of parallel universes to map the micro-personal trauma of suicidal depression and regret. Fantastical elements like extraterrestrial dimensions, time machines, and multiverses function as narrative architectures. They are tools required to process profound grief and cognitive estrangement when conventional storytelling logic fails. In 1945, the city of Dresden was annihilated by Allied firebombing. It was a mass casualty event that resulted in absolute physical destruction. This historical event is the anchor for Vonnegut's protagonist, Billy Pilgrim, an American prisoner of war subjected directly to the extreme trauma of the bombing. This diagram illustrates chronometric time, a straight line progressing steadily forward. But Vonnegut breaks this rule. Billy has come unstuck in time. The timeline shatters. He is violently thrown between experiences as a 1944 soldier, a 1967 optometrist, and a 1968 plane crash survivor. This erratic narrative structure maps onto the clinical experience of a post-traumatic stress disorder flashback. Billy is not willfully reminiscing. He is involuntarily thrust back into the exact sensory experience of the war. To build this structure, Vonnegut discards Newtonian time in favor of the framework established by Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, where time is flexible and dependent on the observer. This aligns with philosopher Henri Bergson's concept of flowing time. Bergson argued that the division of past, present, and future is a product of human consciousness, entirely distinct from the mechanical ticking of a clock. By deploying time travel as a narrative device, Vonnegut forces the reader to inhabit Bergsonian subjective time. The science fiction trope perfectly mimics the involuntary memory loops of a traumatized mind. Billy's temporal displacement is further complicated by his claim of extraterrestrial abduction. He states he was taken by aliens to a planet called Tralfamadore. The Tralfamadorians perceive time as a single, continuous physical dimension. Every moment in history, past and future, exists simultaneously and permanently, like the Rocky Mountains. Traditional literary critics often categorize novels featuring alien encounters as soft fiction, dismissing them as mere spectacle that detracts from serious historical analysis. However, this alien philosophy of simultaneous time offers Billy the exact cognitive tool he needs. If all moments exist forever, then death is only a temporary illusion. This provides a framework for him to rationalize the meaningless mass death he witnessed at Dresden. Tralfamadore is a psychological construct built by a shattered mind. When objective, earthly reality offers no comfort, the brain constructs a science-fictional alternative to survive. While Vonnegut addresses the macro trauma of global warfare, Matt Haig's The Midnight Library addresses personal trauma. Haig's protagonist, Nora Seed, suffers from isolation and a suicidal despair driven by deep regret. Her condition exemplifies Kathy Carruth's concept of the double wound. The first wound is the initial distressing event, while the second wound is the ongoing agony caused by the memory, guilt, and lingering regret of that initial tragedy. Following a suicide attempt, Nora awakens in the Midnight Library, a transitional realm suspended between life and death. The physical architecture of the library spatializes postmodern concepts of quantum time. Each book on the infinite shelves represents a parallel universe, a divergent life trajectory resulting from a different choice Nora could have made. When Nora opens the heavy book of regrets, she transitions out of the library, plummeting into an alternate timeline to experience an unlived life. In clinical terms, this mimics the state of dissociation, a detachment from one's immediate physical reality, often triggered by the cognitive distortion of obsessive regret. Nora describes herself as a slider, caught in a state of total in-between. This sci-fi mechanic literalizes the agonizing limbo of depressive dissociation, turning a psychological symptom into her physical environment. This diagram models the narrative function of parallel lives. A central choice spawns divergent paths. As branches expand, several turn red. Nora tests specific regrets, like quitting swimming, only to discover these alternate choices bring their own traumatic consequences. This process relies on cognitive estrangement. By placing a character in an unfamiliar alternate reality, the author forces the reader to examine human grief from an objective angle. Experiencing these alternate lives systematically dismantles Nora's illusions. She recognizes that sadness is intrinsically woven into the fabric of existence, and no single timeline is immune to pain. The sci-fi mechanic of the library's moving shelves acts as a deus ex machina against her psychological vulnerability. It grants Nora a controlled laboratory to dismantle her otherwise unresolvable grief. This matrix compares the texts. Left, the literary tools, Vonnegut's temporal mechanics and Haig's spatial mechanics. Right, their psychological functions. Both authors leverage conceptual physics to map clinical symptoms. Time travel articulates flashbacks. The multiverse articulates dissociation. Placing the human mind in extraordinary, scientifically impossible circumstances isolates the core psychological condition. It strips away mundane details, amplifying the raw emotion for the reader. Despite different speculative tropes, both narratives successfully address Carruth's concept of the unrepresentable wound. They achieve this by building literal, physical architectures to house the pain. Traditional science fiction looks outward to distant galaxies. The science fiction of trauma turns that lens inward, exploring the internal architecture of the brain. These speculative mechanics offer a necessary cognitive laboratory. They provide the controlled environments required to test unlived lives and process shattered chronologies. These narratives move past the expectation that trauma must be described through conversation, opting instead to place the reader directly inside the chaotic, swirling center of the protagonist's cognitive distortions. By literalizing the chaotic, non-linear rhythms of a survivor's experience, these stories provide a structural map for the internal logic of a fractured mind.